We are on.
Okay. So welcome to the Carlebach Shul and to Exciting Judaism. Please join us on YouTube and on Skype. David Shweki is the man. Password is Exciting Judaism
On Skype.
on Skype. And we welcome back Rabbi Zellickson, a author, a noted scholar of Chabad Hasidus. We are doing part 2 on the Seder Hishtalshlus, the spiritual worlds, understanding the spiritual worlds. We last time we talked extensively about the Or Ein Sof, the infinite light, before God, so to speak, metaphorically, withdrew his light so that he could create a space, and we talked about the residual energy known as the Beshima. We talked about the Kav, the ray of light, the power of the finite, the power of the infinite, the power of the vessel, the power of the light, and so on. And then we talked about Adam Kadmon, the being that is, of all beings, the original, the originator, and in some sense the origin, so to speak. Since even though it's not Or Ein Sof Shlifnei Tzimtzum, it's not the infinite light before the concealment, but it is in a relationship to it. So today we're going to start talking about the. We're really going to be heading towards a disaster called Olam HaTohu, the world of chaos, the world where things don't seem to work out. But before we get there, we're going to kind of talk about where things were. We're going to be talking about Olam HaAkudim. To understand this, one of the things that Hasidus claims to have done, in a sense, because one of the questions really is, what's the difference between Hasidus and Kabbalah? Is it just different stages of the same thing, and at a certain stage it became Hasidus?
Yeah.
Or perhaps it was geographic, meaning there were Sephardic Kabbalists, and maybe their emphasis had some slight differences from Sephardic Kabbalists, or even the Ashkenazic Kabbalists, such as the Vilna Gaon, who did not only did he not accept the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, but he had his own teachings that were also Chidushim, that were also new. So one of the distinguishing things that you'll often hear in Chabad Hasidus is that Kabbalah talks about how man was created in the image of God, the image of Hashem. But to understand that, to understand how we're in the image of Hashem, we focus on talking about what are the worlds, what are the higher worlds, what are the higher spheres. And then eventually we'll extrapolate and bring that down into our own lives, hopefully. And Hasidus, I say this in the name of the Alter Rebbe, is that Kabbalah makes God into like a man, so to speak, and Hasidus makes a man into like a God. It's a good part. Sounds like Fira, but the idea, in other words, like we say in the name of the Maggid, this is God is our shade. So the Maggid says that when we move, above moves, or that in other words that we have the koyach to affect above. Now the truth is both Kabbalah and Hasidus talk about the two directions, the direction that where it starts from above, and we're the receiver and God is the giver. And it's Mamayla Lamat, that's called the terminology is we're like looking up and saying I'm really low, and it's coming down. And the other way is starting from me, starting from us, is our looking at our own humanity and working through whatever it is that our issues are and finding our way up. So Hasidus, in a sense, even though both Hasidus and Kabbalah have both directions, but the claim is that Hasidus, there's more of an emphasis on the human bringing themselves up and even understanding, so to speak, Gettlichkeit, godliness, through understanding the inner psyche, through understanding the inner workings of the self. I know you referred to a number of times, there's a verse, this is Mibisari Asalakada, from your own body or flesh, you can perceive the divine. So one of the things that's common in Hasidus is this kind of psychology of the inner dynamics between the various potentially conflicting or united intellectual aspects of self and emotional aspects of self. We call them the mochin and the midas. We divide it into the mental components and the emotional self. But those two parts of the self, they make one self, even though they're divisions. And for example, one of the things we're talking about here is a place where the light doesn't have, it's not so differentiated into the particular vessels. Hey, brother. So we're talking about, I'll give you an example. I believe it's in Tafish Ayin Beis, where it's a beautiful example. If you have, it says Shmaya and Naftalion were they were the Rebbes of their generation. Interestingly, they were Gerim, I think, right? Converts. It's great. It's good to be a convert. And they had Hillel and Shammai as students. Now, although you could say Hillel actually was originally in Bavel, and he came to Eretz Yisrael and Shammai, so they may have had different teachers as well, but presumably they both had, at a certain point in their life, the same Masorah. They had the same teachers, and yet their schools are so radically different. They argue on so many things. But the question is, what did the Rebbe say? Why don't they go back and say, look at my notes. The Rambam says they used to take notes. Even before Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, they would take notes. They say, what did Shmaya say? What did Naftalion say? Let's look it up. Let's compare our notebooks. So what happened? So the Rebbe Rashab explained exactly 100 years ago, maybe to the day, maybe not, a little 100 years and a few months, that compared to Hillel and Shammai, Shmaya of time, the teacher of Hillel and Shammai, were like a light. And they were like the vessels. Hillel and Shammai were the vessels. And since Hillel's personality, or vessel, so to speak, his unique individuality was that he was a man that was more kind, more liberal, for lack of a better word. And Shammai was more stern. It's another word for stern, more conservative.
Prejudiced.
Serious, very serious.
Kind, I don't know. More open-minded.
This is for Irene. Right. This is for Irene to make
more
Irene
open-minded and more, what's the word, makmir?
One was more in halacha. One was more makel. One was more lenient. One was more machmir. One was more strict. Hillel, of course, was the lenient one. It's so much so that when he's out of his own line, we make the Mishnah, the Gemara makes it a point to say, Mikule be Shammai, right? These are one of the things that where Shammai, who's ordinarily strict, becomes lenient.
Lenient isn't necessarily kind.
That's true, good distinction.
And out of, again, Hillel and Shammai as a whole, this talk about them, and I know in your Maftech you have beautiful Hillel G is called.
So what do I do? I click yes?
You accept it.
Oh, I see. Answer. What do I do?
Answer. So,
Yes.
what?
See it?
Talk about Hillel as long as it's not the Ari, right?
They're actually seeing,
Okay, don't talk.
Is Irene still there?
How's it going?
well,
Hi. So Hillel and Shammai are receiving the same light, but because their temperaments are different, which is a whole other question, what the temperament, how does that affect halacha? But it does, obviously, to a certain degree. So because they have this different vessels of how they receive, I see it also, for example, you have a great Rebbe, you have Hasidim who have such different views of what the Rebbe meant to say. How could it be? Because again, they have their own personalities, their own vessel, and when they receive it, they get a different element of it. They see a different aspect of the light. But the thing is, in the light itself, before it was received and heard in their own individual ways, there was something in the light that maybe contained the potential for the two interpretations. Like the Ari is like that. How do you get the Vilna Gaon and the Alter Rebbe? They're both reading the Ari, and they're coming. One of them is saying, every time you do a mitzvah, you make the world a better place. The Alter Rebbe, you're elevating the sparks of kedusha, but you're also bringing down kedusha into the physical world. And the Vilna Gaon says you're elevating the sparks of kedusha, but the world is now a darker place. It's both in the Ari, or whether Tzimtzum is literally happening or not literally happening. Both reading the Ari. So what does this mean? This means that it's all about the nature of how strong what we call the self is. Okay? The self versus the selfless, which is the light. We'll call the self the vessel, the personality, and we'll call what happened to our
I don't know,
other
by the
friend?
time it comes in.
Well,
It could be on remote, I don't know.
no, Irene, we're fine. We're good with you. We're talking about somebody else that just was flashing on and off. Okay, let me get to the point here. I do have a point.
Can you still see it?
Hard to believe.
Vessel of the light.
The vessel of the light. So we use these examples of the personality and the teacher, the student, to be able to talk about what's going on above. So let's try to understand why we're saying there's a place where all of the distinctions between what would ordinarily be polarities, meaning things that are opposing each other, so that like contradictory tendencies, like leniency
See it now?
and stringencies are contradictions in application. In Paul Mamish, either you're strict or you're lenient, and they come out of either you're giving chesed or you're restrictive gvura. Yet we say, okay, in the world of Akudim, there's a world where they're kind of bound as one, without having their self aspect, their vessel aspect, able to delineate and differentiate them. What would that be? Explain it in a person.